Right, kia ora koutou. Thanks for joining us for this talk on Discover, or Discover and Recollect, sorry, which is organized by the Adrian's Central District Branch. I'm Changuion, University Archivist at Massey University, and we have lawnmowers going in the background. Then I'll introduce Adrian Humphris, who will be speaking on their version of Recollect that's used at Wellington City Archives. So over to you, Adrian.
Unmute always helps. Morena tatou. I will start off, just give us a tick. I will share my screen and hopefully. Everyone can see that. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk this morning. We implemented Recollect in would have been mid to late 2019, so it's been a couple of years now, but we've been so busy beavering away, heads down, tails up, that we haven't really had a chance to share our experiences or talk a little bit about what we've done and why, so it's really nice to be here this morning to be able to do that. As Louis said, I'm going to go first. I hopefully will be about 20-25 minutes, but I have been known to natter on, so I'm sure he'll eventually throw things at me or let me know if I run out of time, and we'll switch over. But I'm going to talk a little bit about firstly the implementation and the principles behind it, then a little bit about the arrangement and description we've done in it and some of the other work that's coming up. Just to give you all a bit of background, so the Wellington City Council Archives have their collection date back to the early 1840s, and the archives team was established in 1995, so we've been around for a wee while. At the moment, we manage around 11 kilometres of paper, although to be honest, a large chunk of that is backlog, about 2.5 kilometres of its unprocessed accessions. And we have about 20 terabytes of digital backlog, although I've heard a horrible tale somewhere that there's about another 200 terabytes of data across council, and it's being generated at a huge rate of knots. So we're waiting, clenched and ready to embrace the digital world as well. Our collection consists of about 750,000 searchable items. It has an asset value, kept the finance department happy. And at the moment, about a third of the collection has been digitised. So we've got a large project underway, which I'll talk about in a bit. Every year, we have about 25,000 items, which are used to answer about 10,000 requests. So we have an incredibly busy access team. And we're probably slightly unusual for a local authority in that we provide property information services as well as, I've got inverted commas, archival services. But if you're looking for building records or building consents, plans, resource consents, property information, you come to us rather than the regulatory part of council. So we kind of have a dual role in that respect. The bulk of our collection are archives of the Wellington City Council, but we also manage records on behalf of the Museums Trust, and we've got a very small community archives collection as well. So as I said, we implemented Recollect back in 2019, and there were a couple of reasons for that. Prior, we'd had a browser, we'd had an online browser, which was the Vernon browser, but it wasn't the easiest to use. And to be honest, in some ways it was designed by archivists for use by archivists. So as long as you knew the series system and relationships and understood indexes and things like that, you were fine. But for a large number of people, they did find it difficult. It didn't manage digital records at that stage very well. But the other thing is, in the intervening 15 years, it was never enhanced or upgraded. It was sort of implemented and then became BAU and just sat there slowly getting more and more out of date. What we did want, however, was a single system that would manage all our access services, our collection, and also our digital content. So we wanted to go from a collection management system with a separate online browser and, to be honest, shared drives full of digital scans through to a single system where we could manage all aspects of the collections from one point. There was also a growing need for online and digital access, partly from an access perspective. So the volume of material that we were producing and the number of customers and the turnaround times and their expectations meant that online self-service and digital type access was what people demanded. But also from a preservation point of view, 20 years ago, for example, we do land information memorandums, and we were sending hundreds of property files dating back to the 1920s in courier boxes to another building, where they'd have coffee cups put on them and be left in the sun and pulled apart and photocopied, and then eventually make their way back to us. So from a preservation perspective, we needed a different way of delivering information so we could ensure that the original hard copy records were not used and looked after. There was also an increasing gap between our operating model and our customer expectations. So for a long time, we were gatekeepers. You contacted us, we searched and told you what you could see. However, people wanted to search and find content for themselves. Because of the property information, there were also issues around how to find things. So about a third of all the property information still doesn't have a street address. It dates back to the 1890s, and street addresses are notoriously terrible ways of searching and finding and managing property. Now, it's much easier, it'd be much easier to click on a map and see what there is, geocode, all sorts of things like that. And finally, we get up to 10,000 requests a year, and those are managed by a team of 4 or 5. So we didn't have the resource to continue on the way we were. We needed to do something different. When we looked at implementing Recollect, we asked some key questions. So who actually are our users? Do we actually know who they are and what they want? And why do we need them necessarily to understand the structure of archival description? So there are a lot of researchers, historians, archaeologists, people who are using the collection that did need to know about the archival description. It's important for us for managing the collection and providing context and understanding the collection. But for a lot of our users, they didn't necessarily need to know or want to know. So we came up with a couple of design rules. The first was that users can access the collection without knowing the Australian series system or without even knowing anything about the collection. They should be able to dip in, do a search, and through the search and the way it works, be able to understand what they found, what it is, how can I use it, what will it tell me. We wanted context to be under the surface, enhancing the user experience, but not dominating it. And the third thing, which threw a lot of our staff at the time, is the system would be designed to meet user expectations. So the public took precedence over the archive staff. I remember a lot of conversations with customers where access staff would say, oh, you need series 233 and you can look in series 98. And most people would look absolutely vague and blank at you. Whereas if we explained you need to look at the indexes or the registers controlling the correspondence, it made sense to the user doing the research. So the system is used by staff and public alike, and the idea behind that is they're seeing it through users' eyes, which gives them a better ability to be able to help people and understand how people search and what they're looking for. A couple of other things very quickly. Previously, we didn't have a lot of standards, so when we implemented, we thought standards would be handy. We actually used about 15 years ago, SWIM implemented a regional archival descriptor standard for Wellington across the council. So we thought it was based on other industry standards. So if we use that, there's some consistency, but that also gives us some interoperability in case we want to link or API into other systems. The content in the system needed to be designed for users, not notes for ourselves. Historically, a lot of the series descriptions just had notes that archivists have been put in reminding them to do things or to check other things. I think my favourite series description basically said, see Jeff. Who Jeff was and why we needed to see him, I can no longer remember, but it wasn't particularly helpful for the public. We also had a challenge around bringing to light items that people wouldn't normally think about or that wouldn't be surfaced. With hundreds of thousands of building permits and consents in the collection, how could we make some of the minute books, the correspondence and photographs about events and the other sort of smaller parts of the collection which have extreme significance or value for people to use, how could we surface those so that they can be found and not subsumed by all of the property records? Given that we're working with the Museums Trust, we wanted to create a visibility for their collections, but we're also thinking about how we guide users and providing different ways to navigate. So not necessarily just searching and coming up with the results and filtering, but were there other ways that we could surface content or guide them through the material that we had. Finally, as I've got a note here, who else can we share our system with? So in some ways it's the archive system, but it's used by council. So there's a couple of other groups across council. For example, Quake Core is an Auckland University initiative looking at earthquake-prone buildings. So we have some of their content in to help them, which links back to ours as well. So we did quite a lot of thinking around how the system would be configured, what would it actually do, and how people would use it. Having talked about access a lot, the back end was also important. So at the moment, we're in the middle of a large digitisation project to scan all of council's property records over the next couple of years. So we needed to have a system that could cope with metadata extraction, ingesting large amounts of digitised content and things like that. Part of that digitisation, we are disposing of the paper. So we also needed a system that would provide digital preservation and the capability to make sure that the digital surrogates were preserved and looked after. Being a working archive, we have stacks, we have shelves, we have boxes, we need to move things around and put things online, so it needed to do all of that. But further thinking, it needed also to do the technical tasks we do, so accessioning new material into the collection, appraising backlogs, arrangement and description, conservation and preservation. The other thoughts we had, which were looking towards the future, particularly with property again, sorry to harp on about it, but we needed a system that offered, we could integrate to other systems within council, something that would let us extract metadata or link metadata, and also with the property stuff, be able to geolocate. So grab geolocation or either geo coordinates or polygons to be able to let people access via maps. This is a copy, you won't be able to read it, it's a thing of beauty, but this is our logical data model. We're just in the middle of reviewing it and updating it now. So we modeled all of the different entities we wanted, what metadata was required and how they would relate. And this, which I'll talk about in a minute, includes both metadata to describe the collection from an archival perspective, but also what we call contextual metadata. So contextual content that we can build in the system to help provide access, but also link to collection items and explain collection items and things like that. We also did some strange noodly item things in the system. Because of the property records, our customers want to be able to search and find a building consent. However, physically and digitally, building consents are made up of multiple parts. So a building consent to build a house might have 3 rolls of plans and 2 envelopes of specifications. So we're managing 5 physical items across multiple places in the repository. But from a customer perspective, they wanted to find a single item. So they just want to know the consent is there and can I see it? They don't care about the physical arrangement. On the flip side, when we digitize items, depending on the volume of material and the file size and the type, it's not necessarily a single digital surrogate, it may be multiple digital surrogates. So there's approved building consents and amended plans and applications and specifications and things like that. So we tried to develop and model Recollect, keeping in mind that the customer's looking for an item. In terms of our digitization, we might be creating one or many assets, but in the background, we're also managing the physical location of multiple things. Potentially, I think we've made it more complicated than it needed to be, but it does work. So I'll just take you through some examples now of the content in the system and how we've modeled it. I was going to go all gung-ho and do a live demo, but having been there and seen things implode before, I've just got a handful of slides, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what we've done. So the first use case, which I talked about building consents, and this is a building consent here. So from a customer's perspective, all they're looking for is the original stage 2 fit out or office building construction for a building on Lambton Quay. That exists as an item in Recollect. You can search and find it, but in the background, we've got 6 separate physical parts, which we can locate in the store and manage. And when it's digitized, it actually consists of 4 different digital files. So given hundreds of sheets of A0 plans, structural, architectural, and then you've got the specifications and documents. The customer can access those, but they're not doing a search and discovering 6 or 10 items, which are all actually the same item and huge result sets, that sort of thing. You can see on the left-hand side, it's a parent-child relationship with the item to the different surrogates. We've got physical and digital, and then just just as an aside, on the left here, you can see the geolocating as well. There are a couple of other different use cases as well. And when we were thinking about Recollect, we were thinking about both the physical way that the collection has been arranged, but also what do you describe as an item? So for example, a photograph album, is the album the item, or is the photograph the item? What are people looking for and how do they want to use them? We used Vernon many years ago, and the way we got around that is we'd have the photograph album as an item, and then we'd have War and Peace written in the description as it listed a description of every photograph on every single page. That caused a lot of confusion and it didn't really work. But we thought with digitisation and Recollect and its functionality, that gave us an opportunity to change the level of the item to better meet the personal, what our customers are looking for. This example here is a correspondence file which has the masters and officers' personal files from the Union Steamship Company. So you have a single file with about 10 different staff files on it. So historically, people would request it. We had the list of names, so we could give them a file. They'd sit in the reading room, go to the part about their ancestor and have a look at it, and we could run off copies. With Recollect, we decided that doesn't translate into the digital world. If someone's doing their family history, yes, they can find the file, but they don't necessarily want to find a PDF and say, yes, my grandfather's on page 306 to 319, and I have to download and extract it, or I have to link it and then explain to someone where to find it. So what we've done in this case and with some other cases is file gets sent for digitisation, and then we split up the PDF into the individual people, which are then indexed as items within the system. So you can find the item and see all of the contents in it, or you can do a search and find the specific file for the person and then see that it's part of the file. So you can go in a circular motion and still we've captured the context of the records and how they were created and used. But from someone searching it, they can go straight to the specific record of their ancestor, which they can link to, they can download, they can share, and it just operates at a level that people want, and it makes a lot more sense. So that's the individual, that's one of the individual files from that correspondence file. We've done one physical to many digital on another level as well. So our collection, a lot of the initial processing took place in the 1990s, the early 2000s, back before the day of computers, as my children keep mocking me for. But a lot of the arrangement and description that took place would have been done by archivists in a physical paradigm where you package things differently because ultimately it's retrieved and brought to a reading room where people can view. So, for example, in this case, a lot of the Union Steamship Company operations timetables, guides, menus, those sorts of things are arranged in a way that an item will actually be a folder of things, and there might be 20 different menus in that folder. So from a customer's perspective doing research, you can visit the archive and look through and see them all. But in a digital world, again, you don't necessarily want to find a folder of operations or timetables and then a 20-page PDF with all the different things in it. You want to find an individual timetable or a menu or an item. Likewise, from a reuse point of view, if we're doing an exhibition or a display or a virtual display, we don't necessarily want to spend half our time chopping up PDFs or redoing things to fit. So having the individual items as items helps us and makes it easier to access. So once again, on the left, you can see there's a parent-child. We've retained the context of the arrangement and description, but any one of the individual items in that physical item can be searched and found and used and accessed. And this is very similar, but this is, once again, this is a roll of film. So particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, pre-digital, we have a large collection from the city photographer who decided, you know, if you go somewhere, you'll do it in style and take 400 photographs. We are doing some appraisal, but once again, we wanted, from a user perspective, we wanted the individual photos to be discoverable and accessible, but we wanted to retain the context of the job bags or the negatives and how the photographer worked. So our comms team, we've actually finally trained them, which is quite nice. They can actually now search the collection looking for images for use in marketing or promotional type material. But rather than necessarily finding a great big document, they can find the individual photograph they want and they can get to it and use it really easily. The other thing I mentioned is contextual content. This is something we've made up. If it's the best description or not, but that's what we call it. So as well as Recollect holding the physical or digital items from our collection, we've found in the past that because of the vast amount of property information, some parts of the collection can get overlooked or lost. Or when you do a search, you find so much content that it's hard to know what it is and where to start. We also, having gone digital and online, we've discovered we have a huge user base of people who don't even come to us asking for content. They're not doing specific research necessarily, but they just come across us by chance, or they come and look through the collection. They might be directed to us from Exio, which is a phone app we use, or social media channels, and they might want to dip and dive and just browse, have a look through the collection, do a bit of discovery and come and go. From memory, we get about 5,000 or 6,000 user hits every month. They're looking up to, I think on average, up to 10 pages or items and spending about 10-15 minutes at the site. So we have the concept of contextual content, which is really additional information that we can put into the system that helps guide users to a particular part of the collection, or it may help provide some context for content in there, or it just may be stories or content that we want to share with our users or engage with the citizens of Wellington and the world to tell them a bit more about who we are and what we do and what our content is and how it works. So at the moment, we've got events, places, people, and roles. Roles kind of link people to agencies. So for example, the city photographer was a role within the creative and brand team. So we can use that to flesh out a bit more detail about why these photographs were taken and what the role involved. But then we know there are 3 or 4 different city photographers, so we can create those as people, so you can actually find out about the people who are in the roles, rather than describing a role with great big lists of names in it and things like that. Similarly, we've got mayors and councillors in there. It's all very skeleton at the moment, but if you were doing research about the council and its change over time, who were the councillors, when did the first woman councillor stand, all those sorts of things, you can actually do a search and you can find about the role of mayor and councillors, but you can also find biographies and information about the actual people themselves. The example I've got here at the moment, this is the Wellington Botanic Gardens, so this is a place. So we have a lot of records, and we're also doing some work with Friends of the Botanic Gardens about their user guides and their self-guided walks through the gardens. So rather than someone go and type in Botanic Gardens and get 406,000 results and not quite know what to do from there, there's the landing page where you can come. It gives a brief history and background to the Botanic Gardens, talks about significant events, and then you can see at the bottom it links to some photographs and some maps and plans from the collection, but also it can link to key series of records that we have. It might link to an agency that was administering it, that sort of thing. So the contextual content, we haven't done a lot. We're slowly building it up, but the idea is, as well as the collection itself, we can start to overlay markers or guidelines or additional context which will help people better understand or find things that they're looking for. Just another couple very quickly. The top one, and as I said, these are relatively new and being fleshed out, but the top is the role of traffic superintendent for the council's tramways, and then we've got Mother Aubert, Mary Aubert, down below as a person. The key thing we've found with describing this content is people are very keen to put in everything and nothing, but we're trying to build some standards so there's some consistency and logic to the content that's in there and a reason for it being there. Just to talk about some of the back-end things very quickly. So I mentioned that we're in the middle of a large digitisation project. Started a year ago, it'll finish either late 2023 or late 2024, but the original idea to scan the entire archive didn't quite pan out when the volume was realised. But at the moment, we have a 3-year project to digitise all of the property information that we have. So because we spend so much time finding building permits and consents and providing access for that kind of content, the aim is to digitise. It's about 300,000 items, about 45% of the collection. We want to digitise and make accessible online. We want to do some clever extraction of metadata to make it self-service. and that will hopefully free up capacity to focus on our more heritage areas. At the moment, with the project we're scanning, I think I worked out about 5,000 items a month. So it's a high volume project. About 80% of it's up in Auckland. Fujifilm do back scanning of all the building consents at the moment. And about 1,000 items a month are done by a team on site to support our access services. So customers making requests. Excuse me. So this is just showing very quickly. Recollect is our collection management system, which has everything in it. The physical items are either off-site or at the archive. But to facilitate access for Fujifilm, we've actually also have a Redshift database that they can extract metadata from. So we make requests, they grab the metadata, match it up with the items to make sure they've got the right things. We have the mysterious digitization processes here where the scanning takes place. There's a bit of back and forth if the wrong item is retrieved or they need help or something's missing. Then some items, mainly mid-90s onwards, machine-generated, hybrid digital type stuff that we can dispose of or we've decided to dispose of, will go through a disposal process. The metadata and assets are returned via an SFTP, and then either it goes straight into Recollect or we do our mysterious breaking up and re-indexing and things like that. And some of the building consent material, because it is hybrid, will go with the rest of its kind into SharePoint. That's a future project we have looking at how we can integrate this content with the index information that's in Recollect to provide public access self-service, rather than having to grab things from multiple places and make it as complicated as possible. So the process overall is still slightly manual and we're automating it, but with Recollect, we have this in the back of our minds and it works quite well in terms of the ability to bulk update metadata, extract metadata, and do bulk ingests of large volumes of content. From a reporting perspective, we've managed to hook the Redshift database up to Power BI. We're a Microsoft shop, so we also have Snowflake that we're looking at, but one of the requirements we had was to be able to interrogate and better understand our collection. So because we're managing community archives, the council's collection and the museums trust, being able to look at the volume of material we have across the three different collections, how much is processed, how much is backlogged, progress in our digitization, workflow for processing and things like that. To be honest, other than this little report that shows the digitization completion based on different content types, we haven't done a lot. But we're talking with the City of Sydney at the moment. They've done quite a lot of work in this area, and watching a presentation that Michael gave to the Recollect Forum last year, I just sat there sobbing because everything was like, oh, that's what we want to do, that's what we're thinking, that's exactly what we need. So this is one of the longer term plans we're looking at, is how can we manage the entire collection of Recollect, but also set it up to do the reporting we need to meet our KPIs in terms of business activities, but also in terms of managing all our workflow and back of house work as well. And just very quickly, this is the digital preservation module that we have. So as I said, we are digitizing vast amounts of things. Some of it we're also disposing of. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just put somewhere and hoped for the best, but Recollect does offer a digital preservation module where regular scans are run, checksums are checked, and it can look for items that may be corrupted and start repairing them, or at least let us know. It looks alarming. There's lots of red lines all through there, which wasn't what I wanted to show you, but to be perfectly honest, those are all caused by one single item that we think we deleted from the system by mistake when a scan was going, and so it's a ghost in the machine that doesn't exist. But in reality, the digital content that we have in there, there's an extra layer where we know that it's being scanned on a regular basis to make sure that it is digitally stable. The other thing Recollect will do, which we're looking at the moment, because we're thinking about shared drives and other content to go into the system, is it will do format transformation and things like that. So technically we could put WordPerfect files in, it would realize this, keep the original, create a Word version and then a PDF for the customers to view, and then put them into the back to be preserved. So that's one of the main big benefits that we saw when we saw this product. Last slide, almost on time. Hopefully that was useful, just to let you know some of the future plans. So at the moment, we're in a state of flux because our lease expires in a couple of years and we're going to have to move to new premises. And that's also going to coincide with the opening of Te Matapiti, the new central library, where we're going to integrate our access services with the library. So in the next 2 or 3 years, the archive's going to change quite significantly. So the funny diagram in the corner I just put in because it looks pretty, but that's our starting to think about our long-term plan and what we need to do. But our future plans for Recollect are to build in the workflow and tasks for processing and access into the back end. So when accessions arrive, they can go straight in the system and be processed there instead of spreadsheets and all Jira and all sorts of other systems. With our new repository, we're going to move to managed storage. So we know standard boxes and sizes and how many fit on shelves and sizes. So we should be able to get to a point where an accession comes in and we can say to Recollect, where do I find 4 meters of this type of box? And it just tells us where to go. As I talked a little bit about, there's some more work on reporting. With the property information and the fact that scans are going and assets are going in different places, we want to look at more integration so that either moving content into Recollect or integrating where the content is so that customers can access it from a single point. I didn't mention it, but in terms of geolocating and tagging, we have an API that when content is ingested, it goes to Google Maps, finds the longitude and latitude address, puts it into the metadata and ingests that as well. So we want to do more work with that, but also start thinking about geolocating. So if you have a subdivision covering an area, it's really hard to describe for someone to find, but if you could click on a map and it gives you links to all of the files for all of the subdivisions over time, that would be a lot easier. The property information we are scanning, to be honest, we're doing a one-for-one digitizing a file into a PDF. Because we have files that deal with multiple properties, the next stage will be digital transformation, where we extract addresses, validate them, hopefully break content up into separate addresses so that we can start automating services. For example, it would be nice for a LIM to just press a button and all the information for that file to appear in a PDF rather than having to dig it out from multiple sources. We're looking into crowdsourcing or technology to list and index items. So we have a huge amount of stuff still to do. We've realized with our team of 4 in the processing, with the hundreds of thousands of items we still need to process, we're not going to be listing things until 2099, but potentially we could digitize and extract enough metadata to make it accessible for people to crowdsource, or we're playing around with products such as Pingar or Syntext, which you can teach to extract data and embed it into your metadata to do the work for us. I mean, even Google Photos, if we can teach it landmarks and it can index and tag things for us. That way we can get our content accessible more quickly and then focus on the description. And finally, Wellington City Council is in the middle of implementing SharePoint. We used to use Content Server, which shuts down in about 22 days. So the second phase of that project will be looking at the content from the old shared drives and the EDRMS that is no longer current and needs to be archived, and what on earth we do with that. Potentially it will go into Recollect, but we're just starting on that journey as well. And that is it from us here in Wellington. So I will stop sharing and pass you back to Louis.
Thanks, Adrian. That is very interesting. I see we've got a couple of questions for you in the chat from Kirsty.
Sorry. I was going to be ignorant, Kirsty, and ask what LOD is. Because I'm linked open data. Potentially, and we've tried to build the contextual content using standards. So, for example, place, we've mapped to LINs, have a classification of places. The problem we've found is they operate at a slightly different level. So lots of places we want to talk about as place don't quite match. But yeah, with the data model and the things we've implemented, rather than going down a rabbit hole and trying to make up our own special ontologies and ways of describing things, we've been trying to link to international standards. There's a really good API in the back of Recollect. I don't know how it works because I've never done it, but Digital New Zealand are busy playing around in it at the back at the moment. So the idea was, as well as being able to create links and Recollect to external sites, we wanted to have consistent and standard data so that we could in the future integrate or interoperate or whatever it's called. I'm old and ignorant, sorry, with other data sources rather than someone having to take our data and work out what it links to and mash around sort of thing. Power BI is relatively new in council, and as soon as we saw it, they started using something else, which made us sad. But I know that City of Sydney, we have Snowflake and we're Microsoft. I won't say things about Microsoft because I'm being polite today. But I've seen City of Sydney have got some amazing reporting out of Power BI. They've got dashboards that show the collection by size and series and digitization and, you know, workflow sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing we're thinking as well. When we first started planning moving premises, we needed to do a shelf survey, and the process materials in Recollect and the accessions are linked in a Jira, which is a workflow tool, but also in spreadsheets. And we have community spreadsheets and accession registers and old accession registers, and my head explodes. So the aim over the next year is to migrate everything into Recollect so that if we need to do a shelf survey, we should just be able to press a button and Power BI will tell us exactly what containers we have, what size they are, where they are, and then we can plan how to move them into the next repository. So it's that kind of single source of truth type thing. We haven't quite got there yet. But it'd be good to catch up and happy to chat more about Power BI and things and use your giant brain if that's all right. Any other questions, or shall we stop?
Right, then I'll continue. Let's share my screen. Right, so I'll tell you a bit about what we do as Recollect at Massey University Archives. So we're not quite as advanced as Adrian and his team are in terms of the use of Recollect. We use it mainly as our public access platform. So it was launched in December 2016, and since then the Recollect company has developed the product quite a bit, including adding archives management modules and other modules that like the digital preservation one that Adrian mentioned. We don't have any of that yet. They are fairly expensive. So good thing about Recollect is that it's indexed by Google, so your items are findable through Google searches, and also indexed by Digital New Zealand, which links back to your site if people use that. We've initially gone, when we first got the platform set up, we had a set of criteria drawn up to decide what we would digitize and put on. And that was evidence-based, so it's based on use. So the items or collections that were used most were first scanned and uploaded to Recollect, or timer as we call it. Another criteria was condition of the items. So especially fragile items, it's handy to have them scanned and put online so people don't need to access the physical item. Now I've got this slideshow, but I'll try and do a live demonstration on the site. So if there's too much lag, just yell out and I can come back to the slide instead. So can you all see this page? Let me share. I'll just go back and try and share that page. How about that? Now you can see it. Well, I've got Michael sitting next to me, so he can give me pointers. Right, so that's our homepage for our Recollect site. There's several ways of getting into the collection. Of course, you can browse our collection or search there. The search bar here on the left-hand side. Then we also have our 3 collections listed here. We've got the Massey University Archives with all the university's history. And then the New Zealand Institutions collection, which is various company, organization, and people, their papers and archives, including our dairy records collection. And then we share this site or platform with the library special collections. So you'll see our descriptions kind of as a mix of library and archive terminology and things. So just looking at, then of course the platform also has these tiles here in the middle, explore. This is completely customizable, so you can choose what you have on your homepage. And here you have the recently added items. And Adrian mentioned geolocation. You have an option of adding a map and geolocation to your items. And so if people want to browse via that, they can do that. I'll just click on the Massey University one to show you what the next page would look like. It can be fairly slow when the system is used heavily. So here you have, then this is basically a search result, those links, and then you can, by clicking these options, you can narrow down your searches with specific date ranges and all sorts of things. Now, on the left-hand side, the far left of the screen, you'll see the search menu. Oh, just the main menu, I mean, with browse, search, my history, my profile, my collection, and upload. These are all items that people, if they register and Recollect, become members, they would be able to access these. They can see what they search, they can update their profiles, they can build up a collection if you have a researcher, for instance, who want to look at certain items and remember what they looked at. They can highlight those items and it'll be all gathered in my collection. People could upload things as well. You have the more information button here and then the admin button as well, which I'll click on now. So this is looking behind the scenes at Recollect. Make sure that it all loads. Yep. So we've got the site settings here where you have the option of customizing certain features on your platform. There are other things that you can't do and it has to be done by Recollect, the company. You've got your content items here, create an item, batch upload, if you want to upload a large volume of items, or edit through batch edit. This is ingest is a feature that's added in the recent past. It wasn't there when we first signed up, but it's a very handy feature to have if you want to add spreadsheets of your own metadata and ingest it. And you can also then download it again to edit and re-ingest things. Another useful feature is rollback. That's if you have administrative rights, you can see what people have added and roll back if there are mistakes or you need to go back to a previous version. Then yes, this page for managing users. So where you approve people's application for membership. Then, as I mentioned, you have the option of reviewing contributions, various things like people can add recollections that uploads tag, geotags, captions to items, or just suggest edits. And so there's an option, you can have that go through immediately, or you can have the option of having to approve that first before it's published on the site. In our case, we've got the approval thing go through first. You also have an email log, which when users have inquiries through the site, it's a log there. You can see the email and reply to it. And then the help and support, if you have a request that goes through to Recollect the company, that's where you can send it by means of. Or if there's a manual which is slightly outdated, they have another site which they upload guidance, updated guidance regularly. And then you can access statistics. I'll just have it. I've preloaded this because they take quite a while to load. That's just an example of the type of statistics that you can see just through the site itself. You can also access Google Analytics to find other things, but this is quite handy. Just give you a quick view of the use per day, for instance. Sessions, and that is per month. Figures per month, and you get historical record of when we started, and then slowly increasing over time. And you can see with each lockdown, we've got quite a dip in access. Right, so that is statistics. Now just minding the time, just a quick look at some of our items. You have a document here. What the handy feature of the document template is that it displays each page of the item there. So a user can click on the page they need to go to or want to look at. And this is a handwritten item, so it wouldn't have been OCR'd very well by the system. Anything you upload gets OCR'd, especially publications, but also photographs. You can see the text transcription there. This one also handy to have during lockdowns and working from home. People have been transcribing things for us. So this would be a transcription because the initial OCR would have just been gobbledygook. Then looking at a photograph, same there. With it's a photograph template, if you can see there in the top left, and our geolocation, the little map. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you find the copyright information about each item has its copyright information on its page. And on the far right, you'll see the description or the metadata relating to this item. And then publication, again, with the pages at the bottom. This would also have been OCR'd, but you can see this one hasn't been checked yet, so you get weird figures and things that needs to be corrected still. And then just the last item I'll show you is a film. We do have a number of films. This one is about Massey, but we've also recorded some of our objects in a three-dimensional way and added them. So it's quite a flexible platform, and this allows you to upload virtually anything that you would have in your collection. Right, now in terms of the future for this, as I said, we've only used it as a public access platform, but like Wellington City Archives, we want to explore the archives management side of things more and put more of our inventories or incorporate our inventories in some way, and be better at utilizing archival standards. So that is, in the long run, we probably won't have money or funding to get the archives management module itself. So we'll use ingenious ways, hopefully, to get to that stage. Yeah, and same goes with the preservation module. Probably not in the immediate future for us, but who knows in the long run. So that's my story. I'll stop sharing now. If you do have any questions or want to get in touch, please do so. I'll be happy to answer anything. Any questions? Right. So then I will call this session to a close. If there's, you're welcome, thanks, Claire. If there's no questions or any comments, then I'll call this to a close. Thank you for attending. It was great to see you all here, and thank you very much, Adrian, for your time. It was really insightful, and we'll definitely get in touch with you. We've got lots of questions.
Cool. Sounds good.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.